Okay, so we have created an account in AWS and we have signed in also. Now we are going to explore this particular platform now, like different settings, different like what kind of services AWS provides, which we are going to learn. So we are going to start exploring these things now. So this is on the right hand side, on the right hand top side, where we see our logged in username, which is in my case Pranodai DevOps. This is an account ID which has been allotted to us. Okay, then we have account link. So let's go inside and check what we have there. So I have clicked on this. So here we can see all our account related details like billing, the bills, and so here we can check the billing period. Anyways, we are going to use the free the free alternative or the free plan, so we won't be billed, but still, like it's a good practice to check, like what are our billing details. Then here we have got the payment details, then the credits, and those things are available here, right? Then let's go on to the next, that is organization. So here in this organization page, we can create our organization or our group. But before going there, a very important point is this security credentials. So this security credentials here, this is going to be a very important for us, because now from hence onwards we are going to create our different groups of users. So if you have multiple users using your system, using these Amazon Web Services in your team, so you can create the groups of users here, user groups. You can create a group, then you can add the different users in that group. Let's say the way we have created a group in our Nexus, right? So in Nexus also we created one group called Junior DevOps or Junior Developer. One group we created of Senior Developers, and then we had added different users there, and to the group we can assign different permissions. Same goes with groups in AWS. So you can create a groups of different users, you can assign them the permissions. So here we can create the group. So create group, you have to say, and you can give DevOps team some name to this group, right? And here if you scroll down, here you can see the different policies or permissions basically. So which permissions you want to assign to this particular group, right? So those permissions we can assign from here. Now let's not assign any specific permission. It has got all the basically no users are there yet in the group, and we are not selecting any particular permission. Let's create a group for now. After that we can we will define the permissions. That's absolutely fine, but let's see few things first. So here we can create the users, different users. Here we can create different roles. So roles are nothing but collection of permission. So if you create a role called DevOps engineer, and that DevOps engineer, let's say, should be able to push the images to the ECR we will create here, and pull the image images from the ECR we would be creating here. So that role would be having those permissions. So I'll just create a role here, and here the role which you are creating, so whether this particular role you want to assign to any particular service or you want to assign to a particular AWS account, right? So that you have to choose, and then accordingly you can create the role. We will create a role, but not now. Let's move on to the next, that is policies. So here we can see there are different predefined policies here, right? So policies are nothing but the collection of permissions actually. Okay, so we can create our own policy. Let's say if I create a policy, so for which user or for which service I want to assign this policy to, that we need to select. But like EC2 for example, like on this EC2 instance, you want to say, for example, you want to pull the Docker images from a particular ECR. Okay, so the EC2 should have the permissions. EC2 basically should have the required permissions to be able to pull the Docker images from the given ECR, right? So that is when this comes into the picture. If you want to create a set of policies for a particular IAM role, we will talk about this. So that for that purpose you would be selecting this IAM option, right? So this is what the policy is, right? So yeah, let me join back. Yes Ramesh, I am joining back. Yeah, I know that I got disconnected, so I am joining back. Yeah. Right, so here we have got this I have just got this network error, so let me just reload this page. I'm just reloading the page because of the network issue. Right, okay. So this is what the policy is. So basically policy is nothing but the collection of permissions. Once we create the policy, a collection of permission, we can assign that policy to any of the service, to any of the IAM role, right? So once we will start looking at different services, one more service EC2 is also we are going to talk about, right? EC2 service. EC2 is a VM machine service. Okay, so that also we are going to see. Right, so let me just, yes Ramesh, I am back. Let me share the screen.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I just kept on recording, so don't worry, you didn't miss anything.
Okay.
Right, so I was saying like policies are nothing but the collection of permissions. Once we create the policy, we can assign that policy to a particular service, which we will definitely be talking about once we will start looking into different services like EC2 and all that. So one example would be, let's say on an EC2 machine, I have installed Docker and on that I want to be able to pull the Docker images which I have pushed into my ECR. So I need to have that kind of a permission first. that EC2 should have that permission to pull the Docker images from the ECR. So that permission we have to first create, or that policy we can create, and then that policy once we will attach to EC2 service here. After selecting that EC2, then that EC2 will get the permission to pull the Docker images, and then it would be able to pull the Docker images using Docker installed over there. So which we would be definitely talking about. So let me go to IAM again. So we understood these user groups, users, roles and policies, these 4 things. Now let's
So regarding these policies and services, we will discuss more in detail, right? Because I exactly did not get like what's the
definitely. Once we will start creating the services like EC2 for example, and now that EC2 like we are also going to create the ECR, Elastic Container Repository or Registry, you can call it as. So once we will create those services, we will be definitely talking about these policies and rules that time, because those things make sense once you have some service running right on your AWS. Getting my point, Ramesh? Okay, now let's talk about few services now which we are going to look into. So here you have got the different services. So compute service, if you go in, so here we see this EC2. EC2 is a service which provides you with the VM machines, virtual machines. So if you want to create any virtual machine on AWS, so you would be using this EC2 service to create the VM machine. This we are going to look into. Then ECR, Elastic Container Registry or Elastic Container Repository. So this Elastic Container Registry is nothing but a Docker repository. The way we created a Docker repository in Nexus, right? Similarly, you can create a repository here which is called as Elastic Container Registry, and in this registry or repository you would be able to push your Docker images, right? So that's what I was talking about. Like once we will create an EC2 instance, okay, let me just explain that using a small diagram. So you have this EC2 machine, a VM machine. This is an EC2. Okay, on this EC2 machine you have Docker, right? So here on this you create the Docker images, okay, of your own, and now you want to push that Docker image to a repository ECR, Elastic Container Registry. So here you have created one Docker repository in this using this ECR service, and now to this repository you want to push a Docker image which you have created here on this EC2. Now this EC2 needs the permission for this, isn't it? This EC2 needs the permission so that it would be able to push the Docker images here on this ECR.
So basically, EC2 is a virtual machine where I am, I mean, if I'm having code, then with the help of all that thing, I will create an image, and I'm deploy. So generally, what do we do is either we will have a, like for example Nexus or some
Docker Nexus you will have, right, to push your images to. So you have created a repository here in this ECR. Okay, the way we had created our repository inside a Nexus, so you have created your Docker repository inside this ECR. Now you have your source code of your application here, in this EC2 you have the Docker file, you have a Docker compose here. So basically what you are going to do is you are going to create a Docker image and you are going to push it to ECR. Okay, the way we created a Docker image and we pushed that Docker image to our Nexus repository. Similarly, you would be creating your Docker image on EC2 and going to push it to ECR. So for this EC2 needs those permissions so that it would be able to push or even it would be able to pull. Are you getting my point?
Yeah.
Right? So that is when the permissions comes into the picture. And now once you want to give different, like more than one permissions to this EC2, pulling, pushing, these two permissions, let's say. Now instead of assigning those two permissions one by one to this EC2, what you will do is you will create one role. So that role will have these two permissions and that role you will assign to your EC2. So whatever are the permissions available for that role which are clubbed together in that role would be given to the EC2. Getting my point? So role is nothing but the collection of permissions.
Okay.
So if you want to give, let's say, 10 permissions to EC2, so instead of assigning those 10 permissions as individual permissions, you will create one role. Underneath it you will club those 10 permissions and that role you will assign to the EC2, so that if you want to, let's say, assign this same 10 permissions to one more EC2, let's say, so you will create one more EC2 and you will assign that role instead of you again assigning all those 10 permissions. If you miss assigning any of the one, then definitely it will create an issue there, right? So you will assign the entire role. Let's say if you want to revoke any of the permission, say you have 10 EC2 instances and all those 10 EC2 instances currently having those 10 permissions assigned. Now you want to revoke one of the permission from all of those 10 EC2 instances. If you don't create the role and if you assign the permissions, those 10 permissions individually to each of those EC2 instances, then you will have to make sure that you will revoke or you will remove that particular permission which you want to revoke from each of the EC2 instance, which definitely would be an error prone. So instead of that, what you will do is you will create a role, you will add those all 10 permissions. So this is a role. Okay, this role has all the 10 permissions and that role basically you will assign to EC2. So if you want to remove any of the or revoke any of the permission, you will simply remove it from the role, and that role is already there with the EC2 assigned to it. So that permission which you have removed automatically would be revoked from the EC2 to which this particular role is assigned. Getting my point?
Yes. Yeah, got it. Yeah.
Right. So that is what role is. Permissions, roles. So role is nothing but the collection of permissions, and that particular role you have assigned to a particular service so that it can consume the other service which you want it to use.
Yeah. So basically, like, what is meant by service here, Pranavai? Is it just about using the virtual machine, or is there a deeper understanding?
Okay, no, there are different services, right? One is the EC2, which is a virtual machine. But when it comes to this ECR, it's not a machine. It's basically it's like someone has installed a Nexus. Say, let's take this as an example. Let's say I have installed the server and now I am providing that server to you so that you can create your repository, and then I am charging you based on the usage you will do of that repository. So Amazon has a server, okay, which hosts a repository server, a Docker registry server, and that they provide us as a service. Okay, meaning I can create my Docker registry there on their service, on their server, and they charge me based on my usage. Getting my point? So it's like you have installed the Nexus server, you are maintaining it, and then you are providing that as a service to your customers, say me, and then I can sign up there, I can create my repository, I can use it, so, and you would be charging me based on my usage of that server. That is what it is all about. So likewise we have got different services here. ECR
So
is
is it a platform where I can where I can use that platform to put various repositories? So let's say we have application 1 and application 2. So if I wanted to put those two applications on this platform and use it as a repository, so as it is providing some service, it is known as services. The whatever it may be, the
ECR.
ECR. Yeah. Okay.
Right. So see, that's what, like when we basically create a Docker image, we push it to some repository, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Now what you will do, you will create your own Nexus server inside the container, or either you install the Nexus on your system, but then you have to take up the headache of maintaining that server, right? You have to, let's say, keep maintaining it, like you have to keep the cleaning up policy there. Then if something goes wrong, then you have to then check that, you have to again get that up. So you have to maintain that, which is your self-maintained Nexus repository, and this is a cloud maintained repository. So if you are not comfortable in maintaining your own infrastructure, okay, so it's better to use it on some cloud, so you don't have to take care of its maintenance. Getting my point?
Yes.
So AWS has provided that the server and everything. You have to simply create your repository, you have to use it as long as you want to, and once you are done, just delete that from there. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
Right? Otherwise it's quite a headache. I mean installing the Nexus inside the container or on the on-premise machine, then maintaining it, taking care of it. There are a lot of disadvantages, we can say, of self-managed Docker repositories, self-managed Kubernetes clusters, because creating a Kubernetes cluster is not very straightforward. By the way, it's not very straightforward thing. When you create a Kubernetes cluster on your on-premise systems, so it's quite a task actually. So if you don't want to get into all that stuff, you can use a EKS service. So they take care of everything what is to be done in order to create the cluster, and you don't need to get into those complexities.
Okay. So yeah, so basically if we talk about this maintenance, generally, like what maintenance is needed to support the repositories, or to put all the data in an apt fashion when compared to the AWS service, Pranay, like
Okay.
because
So
yeah.
for example, see, maintenance in the sense like you have created a Nexus container, and in that Nexus container you have created a Nexus repository, Docker repository, which you are using for your daily purpose.
Yeah.
Now let's say if that container goes down because of some reason, so there would be a problem, like your developers or the people who are using it on daily basis to pull and push the Docker images to and from, they won't be able to work until you just start it back again. Okay, let's say if the hard disk of that particular machine, it has got full because of the a lot of Docker images which have been pushed there and all. So all this kind of maintenance stuff you need to carry out there. So you have to keep cleaning the hard disk there. You have to keep a watch on if that Nexus container or whatever, wherever you have installed it, it is functioning or not. If it is not, then you have to take the necessary action to get it back working, right? So this kind of a maintenance stuff I'm talking about. So this kind of a maintenance stuff you have to take care of as a DevOps person. If you are managing your self-hosted say Docker registries or Docker repositories, you have to take care of all these things, wherein here you don't need to take care of anything. The server, if something goes down, something there is some problem and all, so basically Amazon will take care of it. Getting my point? Right, Ramesh?
Yeah, got it. Yeah. Pranay, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I'm able to. Yes.
Yeah, yes, I'm able to get it, Pranay. Got it. Yeah, thanks.
Just a minute. Hello, phone. Right, so that is what the ECR is about. So likewise, say EC2. Now we already know about the virtual machines. So if you want to create your own virtual machines, then you have to also handle that infrastructure, that WebSphere and all that, the server you have to maintain on which the virtual machines would be created, right? So instead of you maintaining that entire infrastructure, you would be using this EC2 service. So you simply want that the virtual machines to be created. So you will create the virtual machines. Once you are done, you will remove those virtual machines, right? You can create your own virtual machines by maintaining the whole infrastructure in your organization. That's not a problem. But again, that is quite a headache for your IT team to maintain that infrastructure. So which you can avoid by using EC2. So S3 is basically a blob storage service, meaning if you want to store any data, for example files, few txt files or some kind of files, if you want to store, or let's say jar files, you are creating a libraries, and those libraries you want to keep somewhere on the AWS, so something like our Google Drive, right? So this S3 is the service which you can use for that purpose. S3 buckets. So you can create the S3 bucket, and then you can use it for uploading any files or downloading any files from there, right? So these are the main services we are going to look into actually.
And what is this IAM, Pranay?
IAM is like where we define different roles, which I had shown you here. I'll show you again here. IAM, see this one, manage access to, so this user groups, users, so this is called IAM dashboard. So wherein you manage users, policies and roles you create. So that is IAM. So we are going to talk about this IAM as well as these ECR, EKS, S3 and EC2 services. Understood?
We will discuss about the CKs later, right? Because
Yeah, definitely, because EKS is about Kubernetes.
yeah.
But before we understand this EKS, we need to understand what is Kubernetes first of all.
Yeah. Yes.
Then we
Okay.
will understand this EKS. But we are going to first talk about EC2.
Okay.
We would be talking about EC2. Then what we will do is inside the EC2 we will install Docker. Okay. Then we will try to push the images created on this EC2. We will try to push it to one of the repository which we will create in ECR. So basically first we will be creating one VM machine using EC2. Then we are going to create one Docker registry using ECR. These two services we are going to start off with. Then inside the EC2 we would be installing the Docker, and we will be creating one Docker image there, and which we will be trying to push to ECR. And there, in order to do this, we need to create the roles. We need to have the particular we need to create a policy. In that policy we need to add the required permissions, and then that particular policy we need to attach it to EC2, and then only it would be able to do that stuff. That is how we are going to that entire flow we are going to look into.